We just go ahead and get started. How are you doing today, Ken?
Walter, I'm doing okay. I'm a little winded, but I'm doing fine. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me this morning.
Wanted to welcome you to El Propio Rocky podcast, where we talk about anything and everything that is relevant to today. So, I noticed that you have the Sun People Productions shirt on, of course,
Yeah,
repping it. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, about the company a little bit?
absolutely. Oh, maybe you have to edit that. I am. My name's Ken Ngwa. I'm a filmmaker. I am based out of Brooklyn, New York. I founded a company called Sun People Productions. The company primarily is about creating content for underrepresented groups, ethnic people within the United States, outside of the United States. We film commercials, we film podcasts, we create content essentially to help give voices to people who don't necessarily have a voice within this new America, quote unquote. And I've had the company since 2019. We're active internationally, creating content from Colombia all the way to
Woo!
Brazil to Cameroon, and it's just like sharing ethnic voices, sharing another side of this American experience.
No, that's amazing. And I kind of randomly I was like, let me do a little bit of research before we get on, and I noticed like Palenque, right? And for those of you guys that don't know, Palenque is like one of the black communities that is in Colombia because I lived in Colombia for 5 years,
Amazing,
and so
amazing.
yeah, I that's where I met my wife. That's where my daughter was born. I'm super like tight with my in-laws, so it's been a hardy time. But obviously one of the underrepresented groups is obviously the black community, and this is across Latin America. Most of them have like a specific part of the country where they kind of like where there's a large population of blacks, right? And that's Nicaragua, Peru, Colombia. For example, there's a pretty large black population, Afro Colombian population in Valle del Cauca, and then you have Chocó, which is like really kind of like where I would say the largest, I guess, from my understanding, population of you know African descendants, African Afro Colombians, right, are kind of based in Colombia. And one of the things about it is that most of these communities, as you said, are underrepresented, underfunded. Just kind of especially in Colombia with these land disputes with these large companies that they kind of like come in and then they take the land. And for the social leaders that stand up for what's right, they just kind of like wipe them out. In Choco and that area of Colombia is always on the news about some new social leader has died. So it's a very kind of tumultuous, kind of like messed up area as well. Obviously they have there are a lot of illicit activities going on in these areas, and so they're never really able to kind of take off economically either. So it's a very interesting situation. Have you heard anything about that?
I'm actually very aware of the situation going on. I would say this last year when I was in Colombia, I spent some time in Cartagena. Typically, I've been going to Colombia for like 15 years.
Oh
So I've
wow.
gotten, so man, I'm ingrained in terms of like a specific community. So in terms of like seeing the change and seeing like this wave of Americans, I'm using the term American just to be able to not discounting
Hmm.
myself. I'm saying this wave of foreigners coming in, where at first you had these like immaculate beaches with no one there, and it's just like tropical people, and then now it's like Disneyland, where all of these people are coming. You have Spirit flights bringing them in, and I like to catalog culture, catalog things about a community. And I did an interview with a professor at the University of Cartagena, and
Oh,
we spoke about we spoke about the current situation and how gentrification is affecting that city specifically. And
yep.
At first I thought it was going to be a lighthearted conversation, but he went in depth on how his community had changed, how all of these foreigners had come in, the prices had gone up, like how
Yep.
the very place we were sitting inside, which was a historically African American owned hotel, no longer was that at any point. And after the interview was over, like I say, an hour later, he texts me and he's like, "Listen, please don't put out what I said on camera. It's very dangerous for me." And I was
Yeah,
like,
man. That's the thing is that
"What?"
they will knock you off like it. They play no freaking games. Let me tell you that right now. Like, I mean, it's so dangerous that if you stand up for yourself, you will get knocked off. And like I said, this is not a game. Like it's very dangerous for social leaders that stand up for what is right. Whether it's in Cartagena and Choco, and by the way, like obviously for the people that don't know, Choco is like a department of Colombia. It's kind of like a state, right? We have Tennessee, Georgia, New Mexico, right? They kind of like split it into. That's kind of how they organize themselves. We call them like departments. So it's basically kind of like not really the size of a state, right? But kind of just the way that they kind of organize themselves, right? And so there's a lot of different like cities and towns within Choco, basically. But, like I said, it's a very dangerous situation. A lot of people are very worried about their loved ones that, do want to stand up for what's right, but they can't necessarily. There are a lot of kind of conflicting interests, whether it's the guerrilla, the FARC or the ELN, or, these other kind of, paramilitary groups, or it's the government, right? Or it's the international companies, right? That, have these vetted interests and can basically hire whoever to kind of take care of the problem, right, that kind of like pops
Yeah.
up. So it's very a very kind of messed up situation. But yeah, kind of what are your thoughts? Would there do you think that there's a anything that they can do as a community, kind of like looking at the future? What's the kind of vibe that you're getting?
At least from what I've seen, again, specifically when I'm in Colombia, I'm mostly around the Playa Blanca area, and sometimes I go to
Yep.
Palenque. Around both of those communities, I think that without adequate education, it's going to be very difficult. And I think that the fact that most people don't have access to, above subsistence education or above subsistence opportunity, it's going to be very difficult to combat the onslaught of capitalism, the onslaught of
Yep.
unbridled capitalism. Let me say that because there's a level of it which I think is like beneficial, but I feel that without organizations setting up programs or helping community groups teach skills which are above opening up little bars and opening up little restaurants, that you know
Yep.
that's the only way essentially to help the people. I think it's just education, and in time I wouldn't necessarily say armed struggle for that place, because I don't think Colombia specifically needs any more of that. But I feel that
Yeah.
from people protesting, I don't necessarily even believe, again, I'm saying this from a foreigner standpoint, that um, it would do as much good as the economic might of new opportunities would do. Like, you have to combat, this unbridled capitalism with opportunity, and capitalism in itself. Teaching people how to use the internet, teaching people how to use these computer technologies, and trying to get people to shift their way of thinking. Because most people, specifically outside of, I'm just speaking about coastal Colombia,
Yep.
do subsistence living, catering to tourists in the legal sector, or
Yep.
just scraping by, or some, and
Exactly.
it's very difficult. It's very difficult for people to be able to make somewhat of a living wage when you're making $9 to $14 at most a day. So I think that the best thing to do is for aid groups or individual people, former Colombians living in the States, people abroad, to essentially invest in education, invest in, hey, we're going to do a workshop on coding, finding teachers in Bogota who are willing to travel to these places, and investing in them, and investing that kind of infrastructure into these places, versus sending bags of shoes, or sending care packages back to the country. I don't think that in the long term is going to be beneficial. I've seen the same thing in Haiti, where that's just fostering a community of I don't want to say beggars, but fostering a community of people who aren't necessarily willing to do for themselves. Whereas if you plant the seed by providing opportunity and education, it's going to do wonders for that community, because people begin to think differently and look at their opportunities differently versus, hey, I'm going to go work in tourism, versus, okay, I want to work in tourism, but how about I start this digital business which caters? What if I use cryptocurrency? I remember just casually when I was in Colombia last, I spoke with a couple people, and I I tried to teach people how to use cryptocurrency. I try to teach people
Mhm.
specifically how it works, because most people are aware of PayPal, and I'm like, okay, it's a very
Mhm.
similar concept to PayPal, except this would be beneficial. I don't want to give away the secret sauce, but I feel that there's such a big community of global tech professionals working now all over the world, because I encountered them all over, that I believe that
Mhm.
the next wave, or people investing in that particular market, would be doing a disservice to themselves and their companies if they don't provide opportunities to accept cryptocurrency, accept these other forms of capital. Most, even it's so hard to find ATMs that I'm like, this is a gold mine waiting to happen. As long as people are willing to implement it, you get just 100 people willing to do that to their businesses, and you just watch the revolution take off.
That's true. The thing is that, and whenever I wanted to come back to the States, because, before, so I originally went to Colombia in 2016 working with the Peace Corps, right? I was a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years.
Yeah.
I finished my service, came back to the States for 6 months, got married, engaged, and then I got married. Then I moved back to Colombia for, 2.5 more years. Pandemic hit, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But, whenever I was on the way back, I started to, whenever I was applying for jobs and things, I started to look into these different aid organizations. Um, I feel like if there was an organization that I could believe in as far as aid goes, right? Because there are a lot of different, kind of motivations and grants and kind of I won't say illicit, but kind of interesting things that go on,
I would.
with
I would
these
say
aid,
listen.
yeah, aid organizations. And so, I started to research some of them, and whenever if you ever read a write up from any or aid organization, they make it sound like that country, those people, whatever, place that they're in needed them, and that they wouldn't have been able to do it without them. Now, is that true? To a certain extent, yes, but it sounds a little bit like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, let me make it sound like I need this, this grant money, or, whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, that's how it kind of came off to me, to a certain extent. You know what I mean? And I do understand that you have to, let kind of the common man kind of know how these things work, that you worked with a community and whatnot. But at the same time, I think that, um, most of these organizations want to help, right? They really do, like, in their heart. But at the same time, you don't want to help them so much that they're going to become your competition. You know what I mean? And I think that that is kind of like a an issue with aid, right? Kind of how
That's a
much
very
are we
interesting.
helping these people?
That's a very interesting way to look at it, because I think that that actually could be possibly part of the reason why uh, some of these organizations don't necessarily move into that to the technology sector as much more so as like the small scale subsistence businesses.
Yeah.
I, you know, like I remember because I was in Haiti about 4 months ago, and one thing I
Mhm.
noticed and I saw among most of the aid groups or aid organizations which had been in the country is they would set up these programs, and then they would fail after 4 or 5 months, and the workers on the ground knew what was happening, but the higher command, the people who actually ran these organizations in the States, didn't understand that the reason these organizations weren't working was because the locals on the ground had no ownership, had no real control. And there wasn't even a counter organization. It was even a culture of, okay, aid workers are coming. So there's this guy who's going to defraud the aid agency because this is what he always does, or these group of people always do this. They're going to move the chairs around, take this capital. They know exactly what policies are in place to meet that, and then they get the money and they split it amongst their relatives. And that's another culture which comes with these aid organizations being ingrained, where it's
It
like,
does.
okay,
It does.
they know the tenets, and they know the specifics of these organizations, where it's like, okay, we'll meet this and this and this. They might as well have the charters of half of these companies, and it's crazy how they can work the system and make capital, and then when everything is said and done, you wonder why your fishery isn't functioning, and it's crazy.
No, man. The thing is that, like I said, I mean, there's especially I feel, I mean, I don't know, especially with aid organizations, kind of in this, foreign aid that the states give, which is gives to these countries. And I mean, it's very interesting, even during COVID, like, the fact that they shipped off millions of, vaccines, and obviously that's all over the news. We're going, because I mean, I was in Colombia when that stuff was happening. They were shipping them there, and it would be all over the news. The United States is going to send us 1 million vaccines. Yay. You know
Exactly,
what I mean?
exactly.
And I mean, like, hey, that's great. But like, I mean, it's a great thing that they did that with the vaccines, but still, it's pushing the narrative that these countries need us, and I studied a little bit of it, international affairs when I was in college, and so that's what I majored in. But, you know, one of the things that is argued about all the time is, what's the best for these countries slash continents, right? Should Latin America rely on Latin America? Should Africa rely on Africa? Should Asia rely on Asia instead of this kind of, global market, global things, right? Because, at the end of the day, there's always going to be someone that is, I mean, in these places that have, and to be completely honest with you, I feel like every country has a lot of corruption, right? I just think that some maybe hide it a little bit better, especially now that, there are a lot of, documentaries and truths coming out about, the Wolf of Wall Street,
Yeah,
this Madoff character that was, another like Wolf of Wall Street or whatever, and kind of the shady businesses and it's honestly corruption, right? But we don't have that. Um, the normal American doesn't think that America's corrupt. They just don't,
that's
right?
true.
Because
That's true.
we don't, even me, you know what I mean? Like, I don't necessarily think that, the states is as corrupt as, or, as capable of, whatever, right? Whether it's corruption or crime or, whatever, right? As a third world country. And I hate that concept, right? Because it gives a bad rap to these countries that many times have been screwed over by the most powerful ones, right? And then they're like, they take everything from them, and then it's kind of like, hey, why aren't you doing well? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Get up on your feet. You know?
yeah, you know what I mean? And it's like, you can't do it that fast. Whenever I travel to Colombia, kind of think that it's kind of like stepping back in a time machine, right? Because obviously, there are these areas that, have these technological advances and stuff. But I mean, here in the States, it's different, we're just ahead. You know what I mean? Whether it's kind of the way that you think, whether culturally as well, whether it's human rights or economically, financially. For example, now a lot of people are kind of starting to think of investing, right? Because if you have a
Yeah,
little bit more, then you can invest, right? But I mean, or for example, here in the States, if I'm an engineer, right, and I want to become a teacher, I can do that, or vice
yeah,
versa. Or if I want to transition from teaching into something that pays more, I can do that, right? But for
yeah.
example, in these countries, if you get a job, you keep it. Why? Because more than likely, it's very hard to get another one, right? Especially depending on the city that you're in. because I live there. I know, what it's like to live in a city where there aren't many jobs, right? And me, as an American, as somebody from the States, kind of like fighting as well, kind of in that like rat race, you know what I mean? To find these professional jobs that many times aren't existent, so people will graduate from college and then they're selling freaking empanadas or,
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
something that has nothing to do with what they study because that's just what's freaking available. I mean, it's not, um, and I don't know when that would happen there, and I don't even know if there's I mean, I think that there are a lot of opportunities, but at the same time, it depends where you are, because most people they kind of just put their roots down and they just stay there,
yeah.
because I mean it's unfeasible to move, especially whenever you have kids and I mean family's like a super big thing. I mean here in the States too, but right, like there it's even more so. Um, Depending on where you are in the country, I feel like costeños are a lot more. I feel like or family oriented, like to the point of like we have to be at home, on said date, because of a festival or, some kind of tradition or, whatever. You know what I mean? You want to pass those moments with family if at all possible. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. I think that the culture of family plays a big role, a key role in terms of the way people behave, specifically Costellano people in
Yep.
in Colombia. But I do believe that with that, it's going to take a seismic mentality change because you can open the door for
Which is
people,
tough.
but
Yep.
it's very tough. It's like there's a
It's
needs
tough.
hierarchy pyramid where people at this particular level are subsistence, where it's just, okay, how do I make it through next week? How do I make it through next week? And it's like
Yep.
endemic to the entire society. And to be able to rise above that is just going to take education. Because aside from that, I don't want to say cast the entire generation aside, but I'd say focus on teaching people about all of this new technology, AI, teaching people about cryptocurrency, teaching people about different ways of doing business. You don't have to open a bar or a nightclub or sell empanadas or go to the water or do sex tourism or do all this other nonsense. There's like ways you can make capital. And obviously, I'm saying this from a place of privilege sitting here, you know,
Facts. That's very
but
true.
at the
Both of
same
us.
time, I
Yes.
want to hold
Yes.
that. I want to make sure,
Yeah.
like, but I there's other ways if people are willing to just like give other things a try, and I think that it's a responsibility for us people who like love Colombia, love the culture, love the people there, to either invest or start opportunities to help people in a
No.
not
Yep.
in a genuine way, in a more thought out way, I would say.
No. Yes. I mean, as a volunteer, in the Peace Corps, one of the things that I like about it is that you can really see why, not necessarily why things are the way they are, but you get to understand the mentality of people that live in these countries. You know what I mean? And, like you said, most of the time, to a certain extent, right? Even professionals, right? It's just, kind of like I won't say subsistence living, right? But there isn't any, talks about, okay, I'm investing here, right? Because
Yeah,
most people, unless you're like in the mining industry, right, and you're away from your family a lot of the time, right, and just making huge bucks,
yeah,
um, because I mean that's one of the most reveled, I guess you could say, or one of the highest paying jobs in the country is mining, right? But those miners, they don't, they're not around their family. There's a lot of um, interesting things that kind of happen, you know what I mean, with their, between them and their spouses, but we won't get into that. But um, it's just that there isn't enough consistent income, right, to kind of like think about what comes next or what am I going to do now. My wife's family is 98% like teachers, right? And so,
wow,
teaching is one of the best, most consistent jobs in the country, right?
yeah,
However, for example, here, if I want to go to a school in Georgia, right, be a teacher, I can apply, get hired, whatever, right? There, it doesn't necessarily work like that. There's really like two kind of ways that it can work: off of merit or off of like recommendation slash you're appointed, right? So, if you get a certification in a certain department, for example, let's say Atlántico, right? Where Barranquilla is, the capital of the del Atlántico, right? So then the I think it's the governor or the mayor or whatever, right? Kind of has to pick teachers, like hand pick them of where they're going to go in that department, right? And obviously, if you have somebody that's either in the mayor's office or kind of knows the governor or whatever, right? Then you can kind of have your pick of where you want to be, right? And so, there's also this kind of political game of, okay, let me align myself with so and so that's a politician so that they can do me a favor, you know what I mean, and get me in the school that I want to be in. Or okay, my uncle knows him, right? He's on his,
Yeah,
political party, or or one of the other things that I heard is that if you go to door during their political campaign, then they'll have a spot, or a job during their um during their like reign as politicians. I mean, it gets very meticulous, very like intricate, these relationships, and I mean it's basically whenever you get to if you want to get somewhere, you basically most of the time have to align yourself with some kind of politician, right? I mean, and that's just how most people do it, and that's just kind of how things work in a different light um there,
yeah,
whether it's a
yeah,
favor, whether it's a job, or you know okay, I have this problem, let me contact so and so, because I've talked to the professionals there, and they're like, during university you always get you a lawyer and a doctor, and maybe like other people that are well connected, but still like you always want to have a lawyer friend and you always want to have a doctor friend, right? For whatever trouble you might get into, or any favors that you might need. Um, and honestly, it's not not a bad thing to have as a lawyer friend, a doctor friend, and I mean, I can't think of anybody else, but right now, but I mean, those are kind of the way that the thought process works as far as to a certain extent, right? Not 100% all the time, but it's very interesting, kind of the way that things are done, because it's honestly completely different than here in the States. You know,
uh,
supposedly, yeah.
I have to disagree with that. I think in
Okay.
terms of like the culture of nepotism, it's a lot stronger in Colombia. But I mean, I grew up in a city like Chicago. I grew up in Chicago,
Yep.
and that city itself, um, it's very similar in terms of with the trade unions. You have to know someone. You have to be related to someone else
Mm,
who is kind of in. You don't just apply for these kind of roles. So that I would say is like somewhat similar to the situation in Colombia.
mm.
The way they diverge is that I think it's a lot more blatant in Colombia, and that
Yes,
you see it you see it for what it is. You
exactly.
can't escape it. That's where I think that the difference really lies. But it's just a tough situation. I don't know if you're doing any business in the country right now, but I mean, it's really about like changing that mentality. I did a little bit of work for a hotel in Cartagena, and I had just
Mhm.
I built their website. I upgraded their website. One of the services I was offering, I pretty much translated their page from English to French, and I helped them set up a system for people to uh, pretty much check out because they couldn't essentially check out online. And I did this for this one hotel, and that was like my in to meet other hoteliers, meet other people within the community.
Yep.
And it's similar
Hmm.
similar situation where it's like you have to give a little to get a little to kind of get along, and it's a very slow process. But once a few
Yep.
people vouch for you, then it's like, okay,
Yes, that's very true.
you
Very
break
true.
that tourism wall. You break the wall of just being
Yep.
like, because they look at you as a tourist and you're just there. You're okay, yeah, haha, happy times, Colombia. But then when you break that wall of familiarity, it's like, okay, now I can look at you and we can do something in terms of the financial space.
Yes, no, that's very interesting. And while we're talking about financial spaces, I kind of wanted to talk to you about investing in real estate. What has been your experience, either here or abroad?
Well, at the moment, I'm only doing domestic, but I plan to be international, God willing, by next year. I'm originally from Cameroon, which is a Central African country, so I've always had like an attraction. I'm sorry, not attraction, but I've always been very close to my roots and very close to where I come from, and just this whole global diaspora. And one of the things I've seen is places where I would visit in my 20s. I'm about to be 40 now. Places I would visit in my 20s, they have become hotspots all over the world. These like
Yep.
zones where it was like, oh, this is like a hidden area in this particular country, or a hidden little gem of this particular city. Now all of a sudden I go back or I look at things online and all of this they're blown up. I see it all over the world where it's like, wow, these like
Yeah.
quote unquote they could be risky, dangerous areas. For instance, you go to Hackney in London, and if it was like 20 years ago, that was the ghetto, or quote unquote that you shouldn't go to Hackney.
Yep.
Now Hackney is like urban sprawl. It's full of hipsters. It's like niche. It's rich. Same thing in Cartagena. You go to Playa Blanca 20 years ago, it was empty. Now it's full of hotels. It's full of like
Yeah.
people, businesses. It's the same thing. And for real estate investing, I think that being an artist is a benefit that you can see these things. You can go into a community and you can say, okay, wow, this is quote unquote the ghetto. This is quote unquote a somewhat impoverished area. But look at that over there. Look at that artwork which they put up there. Look at this. You go into an area, you support the artists by either helping out in the community center, by either by helping out, I mean, donating to a community center, or just like fostering a space for them, like putting up a basketball court, or just helping a group of creatives create. Or at
Yep.
least if you're we're talking in terms of real estate, you rent out and you foster an environment where artistic people can thrive and the money will come. It's just a matter of
Mhm.
time, because the way I believe it works is artists move into an area. Once artists have moved into the area, they make it popular, they make it cool. Artists move into a dangerous area, they make it cool, they make it a little bit risque, and that's what the allure and the attraction for the average investor would be. And then from there, after the average investor, you get the yuppie, the ultra rich people who come in and say, wow, oh yeah, this place used to be risque, this place used to be quote unquote dangerous, but we can do this with it. And then the corporations are in there and the process begins itself all over again. As an
Mhm.
investor, I think that you just have to look at the pattern and see in what stage of development an area is in. Like I'm currently now in the city of Chicago, for instance. And if you look at a map, you look at Zillow and you see the entire
Mhm.
city, and you'll see $1 million homes on the north side, and in the south side, it's just like, there's really very few properties which are doing well. But then you have a sliver which is heading towards the airport, which is like kind of in the turnaround. For me personally, as an investor, I would go to the area which is sort of in the turnaround because it's close to the multi-million-dollar homes and you're right next to the airport. That's just some, free
Right.
tidbit how I look
Free
at things.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like, I mean, I don't know how do you think that I mean, investing and things like that, at what point does it become like gentrification, or, kind of when we're, um, kind of starting to, I guess, take away from the that specific community?
I
Because I
think
mean, I
it
think that
all
most,
it's all gentrification. It's all gentrification. I think that even in what I do, even in myself and what I'm starting to do, it's gentrification. It's just a matter of who's gentrifying. How are you making this
mm,
neighborhood? Are you going to Is it racially going to be based on the same set of guidelines which were there before, or are you at least going to gentrify it to be more inclusive? and make sure that anything that you own in the property is inclusive and have that represented. I think that's the difference, where it's like before, the racial component or the economic component was there, where it was like, okay, if we're going to gentrify this place, it's going to be all suburban, white, yuppie, this and that. Gentrification is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you're really helping to clean up and make these areas, which are impoverished, a better, more habitable place for people to live. It's just a matter of not doing it all at once, or not displacing people without compensation. If you displace people, there should be some sort of fair compensation. I'm all for gentrification. I believe it. I believe that it could be a good thing. I believe that people could also counterbalance gentrification if they don't necessarily want to. If you look at the Chinese community in America, and you look at areas like a Chinatown, for instance, the way they fight gentrification is, okay, when a building becomes available and people want to rent it, the first thing it goes out in the Cantonese newspaper, or it goes out in the Mandarin newspaper, and that's where the ads are for the available property. That's where it starts. So people see that within their community first, within their community, either in Hong Kong or in Beijing or in Taiwan, and they see that first. So they get first access to the real estate before it hits the open market. And that's the way the
Mhm.
community can protect themselves. Now, that would mean starting some kind of network. Like if we're talking about the African American community, it would mean that people who actually own these properties, who were African American or who were just minorities in general, would begin by, offering up first right of refusal, or first look to people within their own community, starting at the grassroots, in mosques, in churches, offering up your real estate there first before you take it out to the wider market, because people can still afford it. We have the luxury of technology now. I was actually dealing with this real estate investor on this property I was looking at purchasing, and I was just surprised. Like, this is middle of America and middle of nowhere, and the gentleman owned he owned a lot of property, and he was from India, and
Mhm.
he probably never stepped foot inside of any of the homes which he owned. But there's just a wave where you can counterbalance that by, first off, before all of these properties list MLS, hit the MLS, you start off locally, you start off gradually, you build from there, and then you can expand and offer it to the free market. I don't think that's like a too much. I don't think it's very difficult for someone in a position of an owner to do. And I think that's more
Yeah.
what awareness should be brought. Like, hey, if we're going to sell this and we need this amount of money for it, let's at least market it targeting to this community first. At least that way you can sell it to whoever you want, but at least that way you've done your best, or you've made some effort to kind of rectify gentrification. And I think that's the best way to go about it. Look for people in your community first. If they're not willing to pay your price, then look outward. But if we don't address that, then it is what it is.
No, and I love that explanation. I mean, the thing is that you have to do something. You know what I mean? It's not, and to be honest with you, I feel like there aren't a lot of options of how to clean up an area, or, to make it better, or, especially when we talk about growth, right? And investing, I mean, I feel like investing is also kind of like um, the stock market to a certain extent. It's all about perspective, right? You have to kind of like, what is the general perspective of said stock, right? If everybody's pulling out, I'm going to pull out too, right? But if everybody's kind of, investing and kind of putting in, then maybe I should too as well. I should as well, right? And I think that that also comes with like a how an area is perceived. It can't be, a definite risk or a definite loss, right? And then with that, there have to be changes to that area, whether it's visually, culturally, right? There has to be something attractive there for investors to want to invest. That's just how the game is played, you know?
But you can change the makeup of a community, and as an
Mhm.
investor, I think it's one of the most rewarding things to see is when you have a property, or you have like you know what it was before you actually moved into an area, or you know what it was before you actually got a building, and now you see it alive with people and a different subsect of people who are like making their lives in this space. And I think that, you know, any investor on that level, anyone who uh, is doing bigger nationwide investing, there's so many things that you can do in order to help out these communities and also to make a difference and still meet your bottom line. I don't want to be all like
Oh,
you
that's
can change
important.
a community. You can
I
change a
think that
community
Mhm.
by partnering with people, like-minded people in the community, and purchasing homes and helping to bring about a change. Like I see it done gradually in the south side of Chicago and in the area of Inglewood, which is right now it's the real estate is like very low within the city. Within that particular city, it's like you could buy a home for $70,000-$80,000 there, versus you go 20 blocks up and the prices start at about $500,000. And so an area
Yep.
like that would be a great area to invest in, but you also have to know it's going to take like 10 years of you fostering that, of you doing things like one of the things I was reading that investors would do was create free book drops. You know, that's like one
Mm.
of the key. That's one of the key marks of a good neighborhood. If you go there and you see a free book giveaway, one of those homes in the street, you see that, you're like, okay, this is something which, you know, which would attract people to want to live there. Setting that up, putting up speed bumps in an area, increasing the lighting. These are things which can help to bring about and foster an environment. You know, actively
Yep.
supporting
Perspective. Yes.
police watch and HOA if they happen to have an HOA, actively being involved in the community, doing something for the children, and then publicizing it. That is stuff which can
Mm.
actually bring about a growth. And let me not say I'm not on that level. I'm not on that level as of yet, but you know, as I gradually move in my real estate career, I'm
Of
just saying that
course.
these are things which I think would really help to change domestically and also internationally. Same principles apply, whether it's here or in Colombia.
No, that's very interesting. I mean, you had mentioned an HOA. I mean, that is a very interesting sector. The homeowners association, for you, those of you guys that don't know, basically they're kind of in charge of the community. How it looks, how it feels, what the perspective is. And kind of and kind of um, the way that it's perceived to outsiders. Obviously, to foster and maintain kind of an upkeep of the neighborhood. There are, I feel like there are different levels of homeowners associations. I've heard good things. I mean, I guess I haven't heard very many good things about HOAs, but I think that the idea is good, that they just want to upkeep the neighborhood. Even though they might get on you about your grass, or the tint on your windows of your house, or whatever, right? I think the idea of an HOA is great. I think that it definitely, helps to keep things at a standard, and honestly, like, when you want to, whenever there's a high standard, there does have to be kind of a high, um, an authority, right? That does have some power over things, even though, obviously, like all things, that can kind of get out of hand sometimes, and people may have a problem with it. But I think that the idea at the heart of it is a good thing. Um, Another thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about is that I know. So you said that you've been to, you're from Cameroon, you're in the States. You've been to Colombia, you've been to Brazil, you've been to Africa. A little bit later, I'd like to talk about Carnaval, but
Oh,
what is
so many.
your yeah
Actually, before we go any further about Carnival, that's another
yeah
thing which I talk about Colombia. Colombia,
yeah
this is another free tidbit for anyone who's looking to invest. The fact that that country has over 5 different celebrations similar to Carnival, and no one is investing, and no one has
yes
that. So this is free game I'm giving. If anyone who's connected to the culture, who is able to meander and maneuver, that's a multi-million-dollar idea right there, because there's nothing for people who want to do a Carnival tour, all 5, for the English speaking world, for the French speaking world.
Oh man, oh my goodness, that's so
Habla
true,
conmigo,
bro.
man.
I'm like,
Habla
what?
conmigo. Si tú quieres ganar dinero, habla conmigo. Yeah.
Oh, no, bro. Hey, bro, that's so freaking true. It's so true. Like, no, that's facts. You know what I'm saying? Because it's on the tourists to set themselves up for success. And specifically,
Yeah.
you know, I have family, or a host family that has become my family now in Santo Tomas. And if you guys don't know anything about Santo Tomas, that's kind of like the Barranquilla is obviously number one, right? Like number
Siempre.
one Carnival Central, right?
Yeah. The
But
real one. Yeah.
yes, exactly. But I would say the second best around the in friggin' Atlantico, which is the biggest hub of Carnival that there is, from
Yeah.
my perspective. Because honestly, I feel like it's a coastal thing. Like for example, Cartagena has a huge Carnival celebration, but they say that the best one, like the number one, the most well organized, whatever, is in Barranquilla, right? But I would say that the
Very true.
second best is Santo Tomas, which is like maybe 30, 35 minutes outside of Barranquilla, and it's a very small town. But I mean,
Yeah.
like, no, what you say is very true, but at the same time, it's upon the tourists to kind of figure things out for themselves, based on maybe a blog, or a post, or
The
someone that
million
kind
dollar
of
idea. If
yeah.
there's a company out there which has like I don't have the infrastructure or the financial capability to do, but I look at that as like the next thing. It's the next stage in development of that place. From everything I've seen, from empty beaches to Arnold Schwarzenegger buying something off the island to people. I know like a guy who owns an island in off of Isla de los Indios there, and
Hmm.
he was a guy who retired from Canada, bought this island, and he set it across the directly from the Hard Rock. They have a Hard Rock there now. It's just the
Oh
next
yeah,
step.
yeah, they do, and it's right in the friggin' walled city. And to be honest, it made me mad, but I live here in Miami, and a lot of my coworkers were going to Cartagena. I was like, why the hell are y'all going to Cartagena? You know what I mean? But at the same time, like, I feel like honestly, Cartagena is the most well-known coastal city to a certain extent,
Yeah,
right? You have the beach, you have the tourism. I mean, Santa Marta as well, but I don't know why, but I feel like
yeah,
Cartagena is just more well-known, or it's more easily accessible. And I think that actually there are direct flights from Miami to Cartagena. Maybe that's what it is.
and New
But
York.
yes. And so, I mean, that's great. But um, as far as Carnaval goes, and by the way, people, Colombia is a very tourist friendly place. They do not bother you at all. They love that you come to learn about, Colombia, or, that you ask questions about the culture and stuff like that. Like, I'll tell you this little story. The only time that I had an experience where I was uncomfortable, like for being black, was in Santa Marta. Now, however, I'll give you a little backstory. I went to a party that one of my friends had been invited to. There were like it was me and two other black guys. I was obviously working with the Peace Corps. There was another guy that was working for Heart for Change, and then he had a buddy that was visiting. Right, so we all go to this party. This girl that was black from France, kind of comes up to us because there was food, and obviously like any friggin' party, right? You kind of go and try the food. She's like, "Hey, you guys aren't gonna eat all the eat all the food, are you?" I was like, "Oh my god, that is so friggin' like stereotypical." The black dudes just come in and eat everything up, right? It was kind of funny, but at the same time, I was like, "Dang, that's literally only the first time and only time that I was like." Kind of uncomfortable, like as a black dude, right? And I thought it was kind of interesting that it was like,
That's all I got to say.
somebody that was black from France. I was like, oh my god.
Black women from France, believe me. Yeah, I know. Hopefully they get to see this. Yeah,
That's funny. No, I mean, because and then what she said after that was like, how black people are. I was like, damn.
yeah.
I
So
mean,
much.
it's
Yeah, I
like,
know.
I mean, okay, like, I guess stereotypically, they see stuff on the news, but I mean, that was literally the only time that I felt uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? And I've been in, I don't need an unlimited amount of, you know, situations, being the new black guy that, I could have felt uncomfortable. But I was welcomed, kind of made to be felt at home. You know what I'm saying? Like I was at home. And that's one of the things that, I wish that I guess people knew about Colombia because I feel like there are a
Yeah.
lot of negative stereotypes about the country in general. Like
There's so many
if
negative
you
stereotypes that
yes,
even to combat half of that, like to be honest, when I'm there, I try to avoid tourists at all costs. Like I talk about Cartagena a lot because that was like my first endpoint into the country. But realistically, if I'm in the country, I'm in Barranquilla. Like I don't even like to be around like a place where you have all of these tourists because of what comes with them. You know, that whole nightlife party culture scene. It's cool, but you can experience that without necessarily um just being in like Disney World with all of these people who are coming. It's like, all right, that's cool. You know, I
it
prefer
changes
Barranquilla.
the vibe, it changes the experience, it changes how people treat you to a certain
I don't
extent.
even like to hear English, man. I don't like to be around places where
No,
I know English.
yes. Yep,
I'm like,
yep.
okay, I not to be a bit elitist with it. It's just that it's like I come here for this experience, this food, this culture, all of this, and then you come and you bring New York with you, and I'm like, oh my god, man, I just, I don't want to be around that.
No,
I just want to,
yes. Yes.
know,
And then, the thing is that, it's not very hard to, especially if you go to freaking Pueblo, there's not going to be any other
yeah,
American people there. Not,
yeah,
not more than likely. Like, you know what I mean? There
yeah,
is, I mean, it's so nice to feel like you're the only one in a place from a certain country. You know what I mean? That's one of the things that I love about, Colombia is that it's not very hard to escape, the tourists, especially for example in Cartagena, you know, the north side is where like, Boca Grande, and
Boca
all,
Grande,
the
yeah,
walled city and friggin', Manga, like these kind of rich places, because I used to teach at a
yeah,
private school in Cartagena, and a lot of our kids would lived in where people make money live, Manga, Boca Grande, and like that, that little like peninsula area, I guess you could call it, which is the like tourist area and which looks the best, to be honest.
yeah,
Right now, if you go to the south side, there's no, I'm not gonna say there's no, but there aren't many tourists there, right? Because it's the more
no,
underdeveloped, more like authentic Cartagena, that has, El Mercado, right? Freaking motos or going every which way, all on the
yeah,
sidewalks. You know what I mean? Like that good, nice,
chickens,
freaking authentic feel. Yeah. Oh man.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
and honestly, whenever I was like, looking into doing a study abroad, a lot of people go to like Spain or freaking London or something like that. I was like, hell no. I want to go to a legit Latin American country where they speak Spanish and to have that, host family experience. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Because I was like,
yeah. I totally
I
get
want
it.
something that's not, there will be people that will come back with, the I said the little like, the list that the Spaniards put on their Spanish, right? And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah,
I wanted
yeah,
like a
like the
legit experience.
sign.
So I freaking went to like Nicaragua, right, to get like a different kind of experience. And it was, I'm so glad that I did, right?
How was Nicaragua?
Man, I was just there for 6 months, but no, I loved and I really honestly enjoyed my time in the country. It was a great time. You know, I was going ham because, whenever I was given a refund, right? You get your normal refund for college, which is, 3 to 4K. And man, I was going ham. I got fat as hell. I gained like 20, 30 pounds. I did not care. I was eating out almost every day. This was like my first time away from home. Didn't have a freaking curfew. Oh man, I was doing stuff you shouldn't be doing. Like freaking
Living
coming
life.
back, like, late as hell, like 11, 12, and knocking on the door, like, hey, let me in. That is not something you should be doing. You know what I'm saying? But oh my God, I had too much fun. You know what I'm saying? Like eating out
Yeah,
every day, free, partying a little bit, not too much. But man, I went ham and I had so much fun doing it. You know, I feel like, Nicaragua isn't, even Managua because of the earthquake back in the 80s or 70s, 80s, maybe 90s, whatever. They had an earthquake which knocked down a lot of their, the infrastructure of the city, and kind of kept it from growing. And so, the maximum, I think, in Managua, whenever I was there, which was like in 2014, there was maybe like a 3 or 4 story building, right? So it's not super, super, you know, overly developed. So it kind of
Yeah.
has like a small town vibe, to be honest with you, even in the country's capital. And then outside of that, it's very like, you know, Pueblo-ish, But one of the things that I love about that country are the colonial towns, right? I mean,
Mhm.
amazingly beautiful. There are some of them that have more tourists than others, but man, whenever you talk about beauty, oh man, Nicaragua is beautiful. You know
Really?
what I mean? Like, no, yes, you got to go. Like San Juan del Sur is like a surfing town. There's Leon. Obviously, you have Managua. Dude, there's so much that like so many like little jump off points. It's a vibe, bro. Like
On my
I
list.
would
I have to go to
definitely,
Nicaragua.
yes, it was amazing. And I honestly like I wish that I had spent more time there. Now, recently they had a I don't know if it was like not like a revolution, I guess, but it was like I would call it like a more than a BLM level, like type of kind of protest in the country,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Where, there were these like, disappearances. And one of the things that's very typical about, Latin America, if we get into like, the School of the Americas, which was, where a lot of the dictators were sent, the generals, like the head honchos of the militaries of Latin America, a lot of those were sent to School of the Americas, whatever, that's a different story. But one of the biggest thing is the that they just kind of like I don't want to say that they kidnap people, right? But people just like kind of fall off. They just literally
They
disappear,
kidnap people.
right? And then,
They kid
yeah, like it's because like kidnapping is kind of like okay, you might be held for ransom. These people are just like leaving the
disappearing.
face of the earth. Like there's
Yeah.
no freaking you don't know where they went. They're just gone,
Dude,
right? Which
I
is
was in Argentina. I was in Argentina for 3 months, and I remember that. No, wait, I was in Argentina for 5 months. I can't remember. I
mm,
was in Argentina for 5 months, and I remember the Mothers March, where women of
yep,
people were mothers who had their children or someone in their family taken away by the Pinochet
yep.
regime, I believe, were like
Mm.
marching through the streets, and this was something I was surprised to see and realize like they literally just disappeared, and no one ever knew
Yes,
what
dude,
happened.
they are freaking gone. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, friggin' name on a t-shirt type stuff. Like,
Yeah,
and
with
it's not
nobody.
even like, oh, they were killed. Like, they're just freaking gone, like snatched. You know what I'm saying? And that's very typical across Latin America. You're just freaking gone. It's not like, there is some shady stuff that happened, for example, during the BLM marches here in the States, and I was actually abroad for that. And to be honest, like, I was like, there was a time when I was messed up, like in my like psychologically because I felt like, my people were like going to war. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It was a it was tough. You know what I mean? But I feel like it's typical here, for somebody to just disappear, you'll get locked up, whatever, okay. But like there it's freaking like they are not playing any games, especially like back in the day when it was kind of like in Peru with the Shining Path, like they weren't playing no games. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Whenever there was like the Fujimori regime, where he was one of the presidents that kind of like put an end to that, because he fought fire with fire, and it was kind of like the towns and the townspeople really were kind of caught in the middle of this battle, but where the government would come in and be like, okay, if you're with the guerrilla, you're gonna die, right? So they snatch 5 people, they go kill them, whatever, they leave, right? And then the guerrilla comes and does the same thing. Hey, if you're snitching on us, we're gonna kill you. They snatch 5 people, they die. You know what I mean? It's a very like kind of interesting
Tit for tat.
situation that you get where exactly and it isn't really even tick for tack. It's just, kind of like guessing and, really kind of just disappearing people, and obviously in Colombia, Uribe, Alvaro Uribe was the president that is most well known for, his tactics, which are, which have been criticized heavily, and rightfully so, of his way of, kind of fighting with the FARC, especially in Colombia. So,
Yeah,
I mean, another thing, with these places, is that they have a very like tumultuous history, especially Colombia. I think that it's, if not the country with the most like up and down history of, you have the paramilitaries, you have the guerrilla, and then you have the, the friggin' the international organizations that are also, trying to invest in or, take advantage of land or whatever, right? So there's a lot of different, and then you have the illicit activities, whether it's, you know, yeah, let's just call them illicit activities, whatever, right? Everybody knows. But the thing is that there are so many different hands in the sand, I guess you could say,
yeah, yeah,
um, that, they never really get like a break. It's always something, that is kind of going on and, kind of screwing over people, that, it's really tough for, communities to kind of be able to handle to a certain extent. And obviously I feel like the coast of Colombia was kind of, um, more, not necessarily pure, but they weren't as hot,
affected.
I guess you could
Yeah,
say, at that time. But yeah, it was crazy for sure. But yeah, moving on to the next thing. Um, I see you said that you were also a filmmaker. You said that you guys like made commercials and things like that.
yeah.
So
So
how do you set your like how do no you're good. So like how do you kind of set yourself apart from others
well,
as, a filmmaker?
in terms of the kind of content which I choose to show, I think that
Yeah.
the Black experience within America, the experience is not one scope. It's not one dimensional. I set myself apart just by being who I am. Like I was
Yeah.
born in the developing world. I grew up in Chicago. After I'd say after high school, I went back to my former home country, and I've been going back and forth internationally ever since then. And truthfully, just speaking my truth, talking about the places where I've gone, um, putting out this kind of content, I'm able to work across many different cultures just because of this. And I think it comes across just naturally. It's not me attempting to do anything. I like, for instance, I've done commercials for Brazilian construction companies only
Yep.
because they happen to see something I had done somewhere else dealing with the culture and say, "Oh, hey, this you did really good job with this. By the way, I have this company. Would you like to work with?" Absolutely. I did the live streaming presentation at Harvard University about 2 months ago,
Hmm.
between the Department of Economics and I was able to do that because someone had saw a piece of content where I discussed life within Beijing. And I did that
Yep.
from an objective place, at a place of like interest, a place of curiosity. And when I put out this content on social media, because we have this wonderful platform, um, opportunities come. Not just necessarily on Instagram, but on LinkedIn. I put out my content on Facebook, and it's just sharing my own perspective on globalization, sharing my own perspective. That's how I'm able to differentiate myself, and also just being multilingual and having advertisements running across in terms of like commercially. That's how I get clients, running ad sets in different languages. In terms of being a creative, when I travel or I go abroad, I love to film. I love to film what people are eating, what they're doing spiritually, where they go for church, what do the women look like, what is the food like, what is this culture all about, and I do it from a place of like curiosity. It's not a place of exploitation, and I get access to things which normally I don't think the average traveler would get a chance to see. And when I compress that and give you a concentrated little glimpse of culture, people hit me up randomly and like, wow, man, that's really cool. My grandmother used to live in that town. Or, hey, my dad was from that village. I happen to do this, or I have a company that does this. And we build a rapport, and then we
Yep.
literally just go from there. So I did that. I didn't even do that purposefully. It happened organically, where I would just create content about these places, and then people from those communities would just be like, oh, hey, that's really cool. What else do you do? And then we would begin a working relationship and dive in there. And I am a marketer, but it came about organically. It came about, purely. It didn't come about from like having some grand strategy. Now it's more of a strategy than it was when initially I started at the beginning of the pandemic.
No, and that's an amazing story. It kind of takes me back to like, my time as in the Peace Corps, where, they kind of tell you just get involved and see what happens. To be honest, like, a lot of the relationships that I came across were very like organic. It wasn't just because, I had all this, super mega experience, and I was able to do all these amazing things. It's just that, through the relationships that I made, there were different opportunities that came up. Some of them did work, some of them didn't. I clicked with somebody and then, we made an awesome project, right? Or, whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very like, and that, to be honest with you, I feel like that is to a certain extent great, right? Because, after you have that relationship, then you can kind of sit down and say, okay, let's pull our resources. What can we do here with this specific topic, right? Or this specific issue. How can we make it better, right? But, I'd say that, for anybody that wants to get into international aid work is to go into it with an open mind, right? And I would say that, just like most things, you need to focus on your relationships first. You know, focus on, getting to know people, getting to know who they are, get to know their story, where they come from, the essence of, what you want to know about, um, and then you can just go from there. Because after you sit down and listen, and you're empathetic, or you show that you're very interested in the essence of it and not just to make a profit. Because if you come speaking numbers, from right off the bat, not only is that going to hinder your relationship, they're just going to see you as a number and be like, okay, how can I kind of finesse and get my get what I need, instead of okay, let's do something that's going to be sustainable here. You know what I mean?
absolutely. And I wanted to just add another caveat to that.
Mm.
In this day and age, with people traveling all over the world who are backpacking, who are going abroad to teach English, there's so much opportunity. I specifically know of one young woman who ended up working for the United Nations, and the way she did
Tell
it
them.
was she was a backpacker in Madagascar,
Yep.
and she happened to
Yep.
go by the field office for the UN and say, "Hey, I'm here. I'm a backpacker. What's going on?" She got involved on the ground level, and she just fell in love with the culture. She fell in love with the place, and when something opened up, she was able to get an opportunity in the country, which eventually, after several years, got her the position in New York City. So it's like you don't necessarily have to go through the front door to get to where you need to go. If you show initiative and you're willing to be involved, and the fact that she was already there in the place spoke volumes. I'm just saying that there's many ways to get involved, even if you see like I don't have a
Yes.
master's or I don't have a doctorate as a
No,
barrier.
yeah. The thing is that, what I try to preach to people that are coming out of university, or just people in general, is get a degree. In not necessarily in whatever, right? But just get it, just get one. Just freaking get one. And then, after that, you can either get certified or just start working and gain experience in whatever sector that you're interested in, right? Because we all can, when we start working, we start building applicable skills to all jobs, right?
Absolutely.
Does your major influence? Yes. Do I know a lot of people who have, a degree in freaking English, but are working in international affairs, or, that are in international affairs, but they're, teaching history or whatever? Yes. Right. So, your major doesn't define you, you know? Um, I feel like it really doesn't, right? But at the same time, what I wanted to say is that, just as you said, there is so much opportunity for people to go abroad teaching English, and there aren't a lot of requirements. you do not have to be TESOL certified or TEFL or, whatever acronym they want to use,
ESL,
to
yeah.
try and, yeah, like, to be super mega certified before you go. You do not. I'm not freaking certified, and I've been teaching for like the last 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, it's great if you have it, right?
Hmm.
But it's not a requirement, and it doesn't bar you from employment, right? Especially in, for example, Colombia, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, right? Even in Asia as well. I found a guy who was well connected, who had this company that, placed English teachers with schools in Colombia, China, and South Korea, right? And he still freaking has it. So if you want to go to any of those places or in general, just let me know, please, right? Because the thing is that if you get a degree, right, then, obviously that's kind of the biggest requirement that they look for is that, you have a degree. But after that, a lot of these places are looking for native English speakers, right? That come from the States, right? So that is an immediate in for you, right? As someone who just naturally speaks English, right? It's one of the things that they are looking for to be able to immerse their students and have them get, a genuine English experience, just like with any um, language teacher. One of the first things that they want to know, are you a native speaker of this language? Right? So, just like you said, that is a huge opportunity. If you want to travel or if you want to backpack, look into teaching English, right? Or, or whatever subject in the place that you're going to, right? You can make money and travel. I used to, and there it's a pretty nice wage, especially if you get on with a private school, right? And a lot
I
of these
think that
opportunities.
no, I'm sorry to cut you off. I think that these
Yeah.
opportunities are important, and it's even more important to have these opportunities in front of inner city children. Have these opportunities in front of people who don't necessarily
Oh yes,
um,
yes.
have have this. I
Of
think that
course, yes, they
the
don't.
most
The
dangerous
thing is that,
neighborhoods, the most
yes,
yeah,
like the thing is that I feel like a lot of us don't take advantage of them because we don't freaking know.
yeah,
Nobody came up to me and was like, "Hey, if you want to travel, go teach English." Right? Like, there's nobody that, I mean, I'm not gonna say that there's nobody because there are, right? But a lot of it is because people are not aware of it, right? I think that if we knew about these opportunities, then we would probably, take advantage. But, at the same time, um, there's a group, just like any group of people in it, in any place on earth that, don't necessarily want to travel. But I feel like there are so many people that want to, but they're like, either I don't have the money or, they just can't, right? For
yeah.
economic or whatever reasons, right? But let me tell you this as well. A lot of these schools will pay for your flight. They'll give you an apartment, and they may even give you transportation to school, like a transportation fund, right? So there is such a huge opportunity in a simple thing as teaching English, and it can take you everywhere, right? I mean, it's the sky is honestly the limit whenever it comes to opportunities. Whenever it comes to teaching English, it can take you any and everywhere that you really want to go. It's an amazing
You have
opportunity.
to be willing to open up your mind to something different, open up your mind
Yeah.
to the possibilities. And that's what the first step is, just being interested. And I think that if there were some programs out there to just reach out to the inner city kids in the worst of the worst neighborhoods and just say, hey, listen, you have this opportunity. You could live in this, or you can go and see the world and expand and engage. I think that, even if just a fraction took it, this country would be better off in the long run.
No, most definitely. I mean, and actually, matter of fact, my mom used to teach in inner city, and she made me go to the school for a week whenever I was on spring break because they weren't. She was like, "You want to go to school with black kids for a week?" Because I was in a PWI, like middle school, middle of nowhere, Tennessee. Oh, and this is
Oh
like in
wow.
Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I was like, "Hell yeah, let's go!" And then,
Yeah.
after that week, I was like, "I'd much rather be in my PWI because I got jacked up in my car." But that's another story. But
Oh
man,
man, I
I mean, the thing is that, honestly, if we want to be better as a people, and as a country as well, we have to help everybody get ahead. It's not just necessarily one group. Now, I mean, there are a lot of us that, have gotten ahead, and, obviously, it shows. But at the same time, it's like we need more. We need more global citizens, because whenever you come back, honestly, and you can, talk about being abroad, what it's like, and where you've been, it changes you here because now you know a different way of living, and you can understand it and talk about it. You know what I mean? And it honestly, it just changes the way you think, and it helps you to understand people in general better. You're not as rigid, as a human being. Honestly, I feel like all university programs should have a study abroad aspect. And everybody, if you go to university, you should at least do a study abroad. At least. I wish that that was a
Yeah.
requirement everywhere. Just go, for 6 months, whatever. We'll give you a stipend, 4 or 5K, whatever, however much it is. I know that's a lot. But I mean, it should be a requirement because it gives you a different perspective, which a lot of us need, because we all do come from a place of privilege. And it's not even about just, going to where the underprivileged are and now I can talk about it, right? It's about you going, you understand another culture, another way of living, and another way of looking at life and the meaning of life and the meaning of, what it is to be a human being on earth. I think that it's a very enriching um, thing that university students, who are going to be the next leaders of, of America should definitely take a part of, um, but yeah,
Absolutely.
um, any, anything else that you want people to know about Sun People Productions before we sign off?
Um, well, first off, I want to say thank you so much, Walter, for having me on here,
Of course.
for discussing my company and who I am. My name is Ken Gua. I'm a director. I'm also a real estate investor. I'm based in New York City. I'm often hopping around internationally. Sun People Productions.
Yep.
If you're interested in creating content, if you're interested in creating content and you want to do it with a fresh voice, fresh ideas, check out my page. Reach out to me. I'm open to discuss independent projects. I also have a short film called Bon Mama, which is called The Good Mother. It's about a mother fighting to pay for her children's schooling in Haiti. I'm taking that to film festivals. Um, and hopefully this spring. And yeah, just stay tuned. Follow me on social media at Ken Gua, at KENNGWA, or at Sun People Productions, and you can check out some of my content and only positivity and growth moving forward. And thank you so much for having me. And let's just keep sharing and keep growing and hopefully people are inspired by some of the stuff I create.
Oh, of course. And honestly, like I was super excited, but now I'm even more excited for people to hear what we talked about here today. I think that we had a very enriching conversation that we'll definitely have to have a part two. Um, I mean, this was, something that I was looking forward to, but like I said, now I'm hyped, and this is one of the things that I love about podcasting is that you not only get to know people, right, but you get to know their experiences, and sometimes you get to make amazing connections, which I did today. We wanted to thank you from the bottom of our hearts here at El Propio Rocky Podcast, and we'll definitely keep in touch. I really look forward to enriching this relationship that we've built today. Thank you so much, Ken.
No, you're very welcome. Gracias para toda mi gente allá. Gracias para toda la gente en Colombia también. Estoy aquí
Ay, qué
contigo
rico.
siempre.
Así es. Bueno, estamos hablando, ¿oíste? Bueno,
Sí, chao, chao.
chao. Chao.